When I was a young girl growing up in Winnipeg, my best friend came from a family of Ukrainian origin. Because I spent a lot of time with her from grade 1 till grade 7, when our lives started to take different paths, I was introduced to many things that I knew were Ukrainian. One of them was borscht, the delicious beet and cabbage soup served with sour cream, and the other was pisanki, or Ukrainian Easter eggs, that Kim's family lovingly and carefully made every year. I can still remember visiting their kitchen around Easter time and watching one of her relatives, probably her grandmother, carefully creating the intricate and beautiful eggs, colored with dye and then etched in symbols and patterns with a pen of beeswax, before being bathed in black ink that made the colors and patterns stand out in vivid contrast. At our house, we dyed Easter eggs with the much more humble Paz coloring kit. Some of you may remember it, with its little tablet of dye that fizzed into life when you dropped it into a little bowl of vinegar and water. But the Easter eggs at Kim's house, well, they were something else entirely. I was mesmerized by the beauty of these eggs and the patience and skill it took to make them. I recently learned something very important about the pisanki. Creating them was considered a spiritual practice. They weren't just accomplishments of artistic skill. They were invitations into another way of seeing, another way of being awake, which is really what the Easter holiday and other religious festivals are all about. They invite us into another way of seeing, a way that often includes paradox, the both and the bringing together of shadow and light, which is of course something seen in those eggs, light and color shining through from darkness, brought forward by a patient and slow form of spiritual practice known deeply at this time of year. According to Olga Lang of the Ukrainian Canadian Culture Society in Vancouver, while you're doing a pisanka, you are in a state of love. And that is really tough, because this thing is not easy to do, and it is easy to be hard on yourself, or be critical or disappointed. But she says these thoughts must be set aside. Creating a pisanka, she said, is an exercise in how to cope with thoughts that come into your mind, yet staying in a prolonged state of grace. Hopefully, that state of grace will carry on throughout the year. You have that control over your thoughts. You recognize them, but they don't have to change your emotional state. Because a simple design might take up to 4 hours, it's a meditative activity especially well suited to Lent, when Christians spend time in simplicity and prayer. But that said, the tradition of pisanki far predated Christianity, which links it with so many other meditative practices of so many religious traditions. This weekend, as the holy days of Ramadan, Passover, and Easter coincide, we are called to notice how they invite us to lose ourselves in order to find ourselves, to still our minds and come fully into the present moment, that we may more mindfully tend to the world. Now, it might seem on the surface that losing oneself for hours in a meditative activity is the exact opposite of being awake. But from the perspective of spiritual growth, just the opposite is true. In virtually every religious tradition, spiritual practices that bring us into the present moment are the route toward a different kind of awakening, toward the unitive experience, the state of grace, the oneing, or being at one. the deep knowing that we are not separate from one another at all, although it may seem like it, but rather that we are held deeply within the interdependent web of all existence, and that that web is woven through and through with love. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron goes even further when she writes, "We already have everything we need." We already have everything we need. There is no need for self-improvement. All these trips that we lay on ourselves, the heavy-duty fearing that we're bad and hoping that we're good, the identities that we so dearly cling to, the rage, the jealousy, the addictions of all kinds, they never touch our basic wealth. They are like clouds that temporarily block the sun, but all the time, our warmth and brilliance are right here. This is who we really are. We are one blink of an eye away from being fully awake. This is not, however, what our day-to-day lives tend to teach us, which is why holy days of fasting and holy moments of stillness are so very valuable to us. Not only are we encouraged to stay connected and plugged into as many channels as possible all the time, and to continually acquire more, whether they be possessions or accomplishments, we even monitor our own and each other's behaviors, even the words we use, separating each other into groups based on virtues that we do or do not signal. We are conditioned to do more and more, to become more and more aware on subjects that are all so serious and significant. And yet, we often feel that we can control less and less. And it is clear that so much of the world's activity is beyond our direct influence, even if it is not beyond our awareness. I recently had the opportunity once again to attend a talk by the Reverend Dr. Catherine Meeks. She's a leader in racial reconciliation in the US, as well as an Episcopal priest. She remarked that in many ways, we are addicted to activity, to information and to action, and that when she seeks people to work with in social justice, she seeks out people who have the capacity to stand still in the middle of the storm, to wait until they know the next right thing to do. This is counterintuitive in a time when there are so many worthwhile activities with which to occupy ourselves. Yet all of the great spiritual teachers in every tradition teach us the importance of simply sitting, of patiently being with the world as it is, in order to develop a more awakened awareness that allows us to respond more effectively and creatively, and that just might help us refrain from adding to the violence of this world. Our willingness to enter into stillness, to let go of those preoccupations even for a short time, well, I have to admit, I am very much a novice at this myself. Yet this willingness to let go helps us hold the awareness of the horror and suffering of the world on the one hand, and the love and beauty of the world on the other, and to rest in the still point and to operate as best we can from there. It's been said that mature religion helps us to live with paradox, while immature religion presents us with clarity and certainty at all times. As human beings, we often want the clear and radiant answer and the solution to the problems which face us. We look in so many directions to find this, including religion, of course, wanting it to bolster our sense of ourselves as individuals and groups and our particular wants and passing desires. But the wisdom of Ramadan and Passover and the Christian Holy Week actually take us in other directions. They take us down into paradox and mystery, into the sense of deep belonging and connection to God during a time of exile for Jews, into an extended time of fasting that provides spiritual nourishment for Muslims, and into a tomb of hopelessness at the end of a remarkable human story that is opened up for Christians into an ongoing promise of love. Now, whether or not we have personal associations with any of these religious festivals, we can notice the invitation that they hold for awakening in the spiritual sense. That is, the invitation to let go of a small measure of control and certainty that something new and creative might be born. The invitation to stay mindfully connected as best we can to the abundance and renewal of life that takes place right here in the present moment. The invitation to listen for that breeze at dawn that has secrets to tell us. The invitation to be still in the center of the storm, that we may be connected to the non-anxious presence that can hold us and that can heal. And finally, the invitation to follow love down to the depths of our being, to discover that there is a love at our core which is infinite and that can be infinitely given away. We all hold our eggs, our precious and fragile lives, adorned as they are with the symbols we use for meaning and the patterns that we return to again and again. May we be awake to their meaning and their beauty for as long as they may last, grateful for the gift of life they hold, which contains both joy and suffering, shadow and light, yet that nevertheless provides us with everything that we will ever need. May we be awake to the promise of this day. Blessings and amen.